What's up people, welcome back to Rebranding Safety. Rebranding Safety is a YouTube channel and podcast translating health and safety to help you save lives and save money. Today we're talking about health and safety, where to start. You've got a business or you've started your business, whatever, and I don't know if you can see, but my dog's licking my knee. And you don't know where to start, it's daunting. We're going to break that down in this video. We're going to do that by breaking it down into 4 simple steps. The reasons why we manage health, safety, and even well-being, we'll touch slightly on that. Number 2, having a conversation. Number 3, risk assessment. And number 4, the tools you'll need. Let's get on to the whiteboard. So first things first, we need to work out why we're managing health and safety. Well, historically we've been told legal, financial and moral for the 3 reasons why we manage health and safety. And that's not wrong, it is correct. I just think we need to change the narrative a little bit. So before I go on to that, legal. When we talk about health and safety, it's always in a negative narrative, and unfortunately you can't really avoid that in legal. We are legally required to manage health and safety, and if we don't, that comes with consequences. And those consequences could potentially be fines or jail or anything like that. So there is a negative narrative around that. However, the other 2, financial and especially moral, I really do think we can change the narrative on this from negative to positive. For example, financial. When we talk about financial, it's always reduce your premiums because you'll have high premiums if you don't manage health and safety. Avoid fines. We don't talk about the extra efficiency that you could get from managing good health, safety and well-being in your business. We don't talk about how profitable your business would be if these people wanted to work for you and how much more efficient you would be. Your good health and safety is good business, we used to say, but I'm yet to see it. So change the narrative. Finally, moral. Moral is probably one of the biggest things we miss, the moral reasons why to manage health and safety. We focus on compliance at the moment, legal compliance, and sometimes financial compliance, which is what our insurers tell us to do. But we forget that we're employing people, we're asking people to come into work, yet we want to, not keep them safe? I don't think anybody, says, oh, I'm fine with somebody dying or I'm fine with somebody hurting themselves, but we just don't overly consider it, or it's not there in our minds all the time. So remember, moral, in my opinion, is the most important one, and if you get that down, the rest will come. So we've worked out why we want to manage health and safety. Now we need to take the first step in working out where to start. And we start with a conversation. Health and safety is a social exercise, Andrew Sharman said in Accidents to Zero. What is that? Well, a social exercise is a group, it's a conversation, it's a group of people, your workers, your team leaders, your supervisors, your managers, coming together and having a conversation. Discussing the risks, the hazards, how we can do things better, any ideas, all this stuff. Engagement and involvement. Have a conversation with your people. Not just your senior management team, get everyone involved. You're a small business, there's no excuse. You can actually get everybody in a room probably. But granted, as you start to get bigger, you might need to select representatives from those areas. But health and safety is a social exercise. Remember that. So start with a conversation. You're asking your employees, your workers, your shop floor staff, what they think the risks are, what the hazards are, creates involvement, creates autonomy, and that eventually builds trust and influence. And that just creates an amazing business. In my experience, you can find some really awesome ideas on the shop floor, so get them involved, because there's probably some amazing stuff you're missing out on. Next step, assess risk. First things first, go and watch my 2 videos on assessing risk. 1, the concept, and 2, how to do a risk assessment. And then once you've kind of got that and you understand the concept, what you're trying to do here essentially is find your biggest risks, find your significant findings, and then start to manage them. And you do that from having those conversations, asking your teams what they think the risks are. And you could start to build this risk assessment in that conversation. So essentially the first step and this step are exactly the same. It's that conversation, but now we're starting to nail down on the risks of what we're doing and start to pick out those big risks or those significant findings. And then from there, we can continue the conversation on working out how we mitigate those risks, or how we reduce those risks, or even better, how we eliminate those risks. So some of these risks might be quite technical, and you might require some either upskilling of yourself, which I would probably advise you try and do that first and take some ownership in this and educate yourself, or you might need to go and get some specialist help from a consultant or anything like that. And that is really proportionate to whatever the risk is. And we talk about that in the 2 risk assessment videos, so make sure you check them out. Then we're going to move on to the tools and the way that we mitigate those, which is the next part. So let's move on to the tools. Okay, so I'll make a bet that the biggest risks that you highlighted are most probably physical risks like fire or falls from height or explosions or something like that. I'd be surprised if you actually highlighted like stress and mental health. And these are absolutely huge and actually probably one of the biggest things. And we talk a lot on the podcast and in these videos about creating a nice place to work and being reasonable and practicable. And all of this stuff creates that nice place to work, which will inherently start to fix a lot of the stuff. And it's important that you know that before we talk about the physical tools, because it's important not to just throw paperwork at risk like we do a lot of the time. You know, how do we do this? We need a risk assessment, and we just list all the hazards and we list a load of crap, and actually doesn't really do anything. So it's important that you understand that creating a nice place to work and thinking about how much pressure you're applying to people and the impact that your decisions are having on these people and the involvement, etc., and not just throwing paperwork at it, is important to understand before we move on to the actual tools. So the actual tools then, what have we got? We've got policies, procedures, risk assessments, training, accident reporting, data. There's loads and loads of stuff. Now those are just to name a few. You could really start to break it down and get really in depth, but in summary, if you employ more than 5 people, you're going to need a health and safety policy written down. Could you have it before you employ 5 people? 100%. We've got a video coming on telling you how to do that, so keep your eye out on the channel as well. Procedures can be as in-depth or as not in-depth as you want them. My word of advice would be try and be descriptive and not prescriptive. So that means, you know, try and describe the event, describe the process, describe the potential risk, be it health and safety or financial or whatever, instead of prescribing how to do things. You know, we're not kids anymore. You know, we're intelligent adults, and you're employing intelligent adults. So it's important that you allow people a little bit of leeway to think for themselves and be innovative. Risk assessments. With risk assessment, the same kind of applies. You know, you want to be reasonable, you want to be practical, and you're going to need these. But remember, you know, it's more important you get the concept as opposed to the piece of paper. You have a recorded significant findings, that's what you're legally required to do, so you record your significant findings. But the risk assessment is a conversation, so remember that. Have your risk assessments, but make sure they're valuable, they're reasonable, and they're practical. Training. Now, you might not consider training as a tool, but I thought it was worth noting because one, it is a massive part of what you do in your business. It's part of the wider picture of competency. Remember, training on its own doesn't create competency. Competency is what I like to call CATE. Knowledge, attitude, training, and experience. Training is just one of those things. Sorry. So remember, K and training is apparently the middle finger. So, training. Why do I say that? Well, I say that because a lot of people think they can buy some training in and all their problems will be fixed tomorrow. But your behaviours are defined by the environment. So if you train somebody to lift correctly, but everyone in the business is not lifting correctly, you're going to stick out like a sore thumb, and you're most probably going to be slower than everyone else. So they're not going to do it. And that's why it's important to consider training, but remember, everything else needs to work as well for the training to work, and that's important to know. And lastly, accident reporting and the data of your accidents. So data management and accident reporting. Accident reporting is massively important. You do need to record your accidents, you do need to investigate your accidents, and enable you to have lessons learned and improve. And you're going to need to record this stuff in your data management. Also, it's important to note that some of them will come under RIDDLE, and you might need to legally report them to the HSE. And we've done a podcast on that, we'll link it in the description below. So why do you need to have data management then of your accident reporting? Well, it helps to kind of monitor your accidents, it helps to kind of understand where you're going wrong, and as much as, you know, all boardrooms like a rag pie chart or whatever we're going to call them, don't want to get bogged down on them, but they are good to be able to sit back and look at a graph or a picture and be able to say, we've got problems in slips and trips, or we've got loads of lost time for manual handling, or something like that, and you can really start to drill down on where your problem actually is in your business. Okay, to kind of summarise or close out all those tools bits that we've mentioned, there's a lot going on there. It's important to just remember that the reason I say don't throw paperwork at stuff is Just use an example of hot water signs or warning hot water on your taps. Have you ever burnt your hand on a tap? I bet you have, and I bet you there was a hot water sign there. But because you're so used to seeing them everywhere, you become what we call learned stupid or learned stupidity, because we're treating you stupid. So whilst all these tools are important, and yes, they do something, you need to make sure that you're not creating stupidity by being too prescriptive and too over the top with how you're doing stuff and assuming your staff are stupid. If you've hired stupid and not invested in your staff, then who's stupid? It's probably you. So signage is a tool, and it's a good tool, but the way we use it and the we use it essentially like wallpaper in some businesses, it becomes a pointless tool. So where you have good signage, where it's meant to be and it's doing the right thing, people ignore it because they're so used to ignoring it. Think of fire doors. There's a lot of fire doors out there. Don't need to be fire doors. Yet we pop them open. That subconsciously teaches us to ignore the signage. So just remember that. Okay guys, that was health and safety, where to start. I hope you liked it. If you did like it, hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and the bell so you never miss another episode. If you've got other business owners, business managers or your friends or anything, share this video, share the wealth. Everybody needs to know this stuff. So let's get into my top tips. Number one, probably my most favourite and one I talk about all the time, involve your staff. If you don't involve your staff, your teams, it's not going to work. Involving them develops ownership, it develops interest. There'll be things that they know that you don't know, and it just creates a much better environment to work. So involve your staff. Number two is be reasonable. Everything that you do for health and safety should have a value. Don't have a risk assessment or a policy or procedure for the sake of having it or because you feel like you need to have it. Have it because you need it. Have it because it brings value. Ask yourself, does this piece of paper bring value? And if you're involving your staff, they'll tell you anyway. So involve your staff, be reasonable. Number three is if you focus on making your workplace just a nice place to work, everything else will follow. This is probably the secret of health and safety that not many people have picked up on in the past. But if you just make your place somewhere where people want to work and you somebody that people want to work for, everything else will follow. So what do I mean? Well, basically, if you can involve your staff, you can do reasonable risk assessments, but if I don't want to work for you, I'm gonna have a negative attitude and I'm probably not gonna follow the rules anyway. I'm just gonna go in, get the job done as quick as possible so the day ends. I'm looking forward to the end of the day. But if you make it a place where people want to come, want to work for you as their leader, they know you're involving them, they know everything you do is reasonable, and they want to work for you, then they'll look at a risk assessment and go, oh, okay, if James thinks that that's something we need to do, I know he's involved everyone, I know he's normally quite reasonable, it must be on there for a reason. Actually, I just really like James, so I'm just going to do it. If you think about the biggest leaders in military and sport, people want to fight for them, people want to play for them and win for them. It comes from leadership and being in an environment where you want to be. Okay guys, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next video. Safe.